Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists, this is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
Our weekly edition of Tracking the Tropics, everything you need to know about the next system and what we expect beyond that. I am joined by our resident meteorologist, Juliana Mejia. I'm meteorologist Rebecca Berry. It is Tuesday at 12:30, so it's time for Tracking the Tropics. We always hop on if there's anything important developing, but if there's just run-of-the-mill stuff going on, we join you every Tuesday at 12:30, and we are here to answer your questions. This is an interactive program. In order for us to be able to see your comment and bring it here on screen, you do need to use one of our branded hashtags, hashtag Hey Rebecca or hashtag Hey Juliana. We can answer your questions from TikTok, from Facebook, anywhere you're watching us. We can try to answer those questions. And we know you have a lot because the social media posts about this next system have been crazy.
Indeed. So jumping right into it, because, you know, it's funny. I'm seeing the comments already popping up on TikTok. Shout out to TikTok at that. What's happening? And understandably, you know, if you're not all eyes like we are literally day in and day out watching what's going on, you're wondering what now is popping up in the Atlantic. This is actually a tropical wave we've been watching for days, for what feels like, to me at least, forever.
Yes.
This has been so slow to finally come off of the coast of Africa, and finally now the last 24-ish hours, 36 hours has now been over the water here, and has now steadily increasing chances of tropical development. So right now about a 30% chance for the next 48 hours, 70% chance, so a higher chance in the longer term. So we're kind of looking to like Thursday, Friday for this to potentially try to do a little something and become a tropical depression. If not, this could even wait until this weekend to really wrap up and try to become a depression here. So there's a look at the European model. We've kind of been showing this all morning and since yesterday as well. Good, consistent so far signal from kind of forecast models across the board of just steadily, slowly but surely working its way to the west, maybe a tad to the northwest there. Kind of generally been seeing this hugging farther to the north a little bit, staying north and out of the Caribbean. Of course, that's a very early signal right now.
But have you ever loved a cold front more than that one?
Exactly. Have I ever loved a cold front as much as I will? Exactly. And you know, it is that time of year we're going to start seeing some more of those fronts rolling through. And as Chief Meteorologist Jeff Baradelli had put it, acting as our hurricane blocker. So as of right now, looking, you know, positive. And of course, we're going to think positive thoughts, but it's not really looking like something to worry about at the moment. And this is setting up in a very usual fashion. This is pretty typical for this time of year to see. What you quite literally see is most likely areas for development throughout the month of September. And we're ringing true at that first day or so now of September with the central eastern Atlantic. And then we see these systems generally scoop and kind of take a turn, very similar to what Aaron did to the north. And so that's generally looking to be what plays out as of right now. But of course, we still have days and days to watch the progress of this. And once it organizes a little bit more, models will have a better handle on how what we can expect with the progress of it. Of course, areas like the Leeward Islands and portions of the Caribbean will want to keep a close eye on this one way or another. Now, something also that we've been talking about is this lull in activity, and it has been a little almost awkwardly quiet so far throughout what typically is at this point in the season where things start to ramp up. And that's because we've really consistently seen this area of sinking air, and we're kind of now starting to see the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation, which is just a climatological pattern that we see on a some few weeks, maybe a couple months kind of basis, and it fluctuates, and it's essentially this belt of moisture as well as rising air that'll track eastward, and that will help to kick things into gear here over the next couple of weeks, which, you know, is right about on time now because we're working our way towards the peak of hurricane season. I wanted to bring in, you know, just for fun here, the comparison of the GFS versus the Euro with this.
People love seeing this.
Yeah, exactly. You know, at least consistency for the first few days. And of course, again, this is still not organized well enough for these to handle it very well. It actually looks like even the GFS has updated here in the last few minutes. The GFS actually, though, holding a little farther to the north than the Euro, but
it is a stronger system. The GFS develops it a lot faster and makes it a much stronger system. You can see because the isobars there are tighter. That's an indication of a lower pressure and a stronger system. Whereas looking at the red lines, they're a lot looser. There's a lot more space between them. That's an indication that it's a weaker system. And we know from experience that stronger storms tend to go further north and make that turn to the north faster. And so that kind of makes sense why we're getting that departure, because they do expect them to be widely different. For the Euro's reading a much lower pressure than the GFS is at this point.
Exactly. And then, just taking y'all through the forecast with us, of course, looking at all the different parameters, things to keep in mind. So lower wind shears ahead of this system and this tropical wave as of right now. And then the ring here generally where it could end up as we look out about 7 days or so, kind of inching its way towards the Caribbean. And then some higher wind shear could try to sneak in behind it a little bit. But of course, this is still, looking out a week or more. But just things that we'll have our eye on, as well as, we always like to touch on Saharan dust, which there are batches of Saharan dust that'll kind of be floating out there for the most part, and that is still
pretty healthy for early September.
Yes, exactly. This is the time of year this typically starts to die down. So that is something to mention and just note.
We are getting a ton of questions rolling in. Do you want to pepper some of those in?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So once again, this is an interactive program. And so we want you to use our hashtag #HeyRebecca or #HeyJuliana in order for us to see your comments. And so this one, I think, is going to be heavily, the answer to this is basically on the time of the year. But hey, Juliana, what percentage of tropical waves actually develop? And so that's a complicated question because this time of the year, a lot of them develop, but especially in June, July, August, a lot of them don't end up developing.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is the time of year where typically they start to pick up a little bit more steam. And, I guess that actually does kind of bring me back to this as well. It's because throughout, I can't speak statistically. I do not know exactly what percentage of tropical waves, because there are constantly tropical waves that are just rolling across the Atlantic basin and the tropical basin. But, this is the time of year that we typically see them actually manage to do anything because in the earlier part of the season, these tropical waves are generally coming from Africa and that almost equatorial belt, and they need the warm sea surface temperatures to really do anything. And it's not until the later part, this middle and end part of the season, that the Atlantic is warm enough for that.
And we make that shift away from Saharan dust, away from those more quiet conditions. So by this time of the year, almost all of them develop. We've got another great question rolling in. #HeyJuliana, do you expect the tropics to quiet down after this storm? Wah, wah, wah.
No. Unfortunately, the opposite. It is still forecast to be an above average season. I know that's kind of been a tease with this quiet, I don't want to call it a spell, but it is just this lull, and it can be really deceiving, but that's just not the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, the statistic that speaks to me is this time of the year, we still have 75% of the storms to get through statistically. Like we just haven't seen much so far. So typically this time of the year, we still have 70% of the tropics to go. And if you'll remember last year, we had the same kind of eerily quiet lull, especially this time of the year. And it really didn't pick up until late September. And that made for the late season as well. We got those unusual and unusually strong storms in October as well. So unfortunately, we still have a long way to go. Juliana and I were talking about this graphic earlier. So this is last year. And so you see those kind of June, July, 1 or 2 there. And really in August, we didn't have much either, Debbie and Ernesto. And then mid-September hit, and it hit like a storm because then we went Francine, Gordon, Helene, Isaac, Joyce, and almost Kirk. Kirk started the day after, but man, backloaded season last year for sure.
And we felt it. You visually, you see it, and it's like one on top of the other, quite literally. But in living it in real time, it felt like, oh my gosh, another one, right back to back. And so, of course, fingers crossed. We don't do that again this season.
We're voting for fish storms this season.
Exactly.
All right. #Hey Rebecca, I'm cruising October 6th. Is that a bad time for hurricanes? Well, it's not a great time, But the good news about cruises is they have their own meteorologists. They are experts at driving you around those storms. It doesn't say where you're cruising to, but they will be able to get you out. And it might not be your original itinerary that you booked, but they will make sure that you are out of the storm. They do not drive those very expensive cruise ships and all those passengers into storms. They get you as far away as they can. You might have a day at sea, or you might, change your landing spot here or there, but they generally do not put you in any danger, which is good news. All right. We got another question. Hashtag Hey Rebecca, hashtag Hey Juliana. I, like many, have been watching the Katrina documentary, and I'm curious. They had very short notice to evacuate the city. Do y'all think things might have been different with today's computer models? And I did see a comparison of how wide the forecast cone was, which is the uncertainty and the margin of error for Katrina versus 20 years later. It's much, much better. With Katrina, they knew that they might be impacted, and they were under evacuation orders at least 48 hours in advance. But what was different with Katrina is it hit the loop current and went from a category 2 to a category 5 the day and a half before landfall. So much like when we talk about rapid intensification closer to shore, people that might not consider evacuating for a category 2, but would definitely evacuate for a category 5.
That reminds me of Otis.
Yeah.
And what city was that? It was Mexico, but Otis was one of those as well, where it went from tropical storm to a Cat 5
overnight right along the shore.
It was insane to see and watch from a distance. But this actually, we were talking about this graphic, and this kind of, I think, goes to show as well, because it's been 20 years?
20 years since Katrina.
So, we've come a long way, and every year, we still have plenty of improvement to do. And I say that as, the field of meteorology and tropical forecasting, but also have come a long way. And I think that's a fair question to ask. And I think it's a good point.
Absolutely. We would know more at this point. I will say that of hurricane forecasting, even as far as it's come, the most mercurial is still intensity forecasting. That's still the part that sometimes models don't get a good grasp on. Now, some models are better at it than others, but this is interesting. So this graphic that Juliana was saying that we were talking about earlier, it's all the forecast paths for Aaron. So the most recent hurricane, we had that big fish storm, and you can see how close they were even from the first hurricane path. That's a very small margin of error. The white path is what it actually took. So it's also interesting that it absolutely took the eastern edge of all of those paths, until it made that turn. Once it made the turn, those lines that are more red in color are the most recent ones. Those were dead on in terms of what you could expect with it. So I do think that things do have an influence, like when it makes the turn. I always say all bets are off until it makes it over Hispaniola, because a lot of systems don't make it over the mountain ranges there. Or if they do make it over the mountain ranges, the new center of formation on the other side of Hispaniola is often very, very different, which changes the trajectory. And so all bets are off until it makes it over Hispaniola if it's on that path. And then all bets are off until it actually makes the turn, because the speed at which it makes the turn, the angle at which it makes the turn, oftentimes dramatically changes the forecast. But Aaron behaved. All the forecast models had a great handle on it. The AI ones did great. The traditional ones did great. It was just a very predictable storm.
Do we have more questions?
Yeah, we do. All right.
Cool.
Hashtag Hey Rebecca. When do we usually start to see storms popping up in the Gulf? And so the Gulf, really early and late in the season is when we kind of look for the Gulf to be a hot spot. We have our October development. So we've already made it past August. August is kind of a time for us, because a lot of times we do see storms in the Gulf in August. But our next time is October. And so that's Juliana's got the formation zones right there for you, showing that we do have the more likely development in areas that not only would be in the Gulf, but also would influence the Tampa Bay area. And that's where we're based out of here in WFLA. So really kind of ducking through September, but a little worried about October as always.
Yeah. These are great questions also coming through.
Great questions. We love them. Great questions coming from TikTok. Great questions coming from Facebook. Just use one of our hashtags, hashtag Hey Rebecca or hashtag Hey Juliana, so we can pull them on the screen just like this one. Hashtag Hey Rebecca, is NOAA still calling for an above average season? Unfortunately, absolutely. And so we still have a lot of the season to get through. There's still a lot of energy out there in the Atlantic, and they are still calling for an above average season. Juliana pulled up the numbers for us. NOAA's calling for 13 to 18 named storms. We've already gotten through a couple of those. The next name is Gabrielle. And so that's where we are on the list. In terms of hurricanes, they're calling for 5 to 9. We've only had one. In terms of major hurricanes, they're calling for 2 to 5. Of the one hurricane we had, it was a major hurricane. So that's where we're at on the list. A lot of tropical storm activity out there. All right. Hashtag Hey Juliana, is it normal for things to be kind of quiet this time of year? It's too quiet.
It's eerily quiet. Ooh. Indeed. No, it's really not. That, typically August to the start of September, you can visually see. That's when we see on average a big jump and a big uptick. So it is eerily quiet. It is a very fair observation. And we showed that example of last season behaving similarly. And obviously, not every season is going to behave as average. That's why it's an average. Things change from time to time. And of course, we have different climatological patterns and factors that all play into it. So it's not necessarily like it will ever scream that this is signaling one thing over another just because it behaves a little outside of the norm, just to make that clear as well.
All right, the next question, and we get this one every season, all season long. It's a great question. Hashtag Hey Rebecca, why are there differences between the two models and which model is most reliable? And so what Peter's talking about there is the GFS versus the Euro. And it goes back and forth. And I think it has a lot to do with the overall patterns of the season. Sometimes the GFS will have a really good year and be way more accurate than the Euro. Sometimes the Euro really outperforms the GFS. And the models are different because they're built to key on different factors and to place different levels of importance on different factors, whether it's upper level winds or the greater mesoscale systems. They recognize different things as more important, and that's how they come up with different outcomes. And the true answer is neither one is every time better. Mm-hmm. Now, the GFS has certain tendencies, like we call them GFS-icanes, and that's what you see crazy social media posts about. The GFS, from the beginning of hurricane season, will find a way to create a fake hurricane 10 to 14 days out. It's just what it does, and we know not to rely on it. We know not to pay attention to it. We really know not to post it. Some of us know not to post it.
Yeah.
Because it just creates anxiety. And if we were going to post it, the caption would be, well, this is never going to happen, because it doesn't. Not once this season has any of those GFS-icanes come true. And so that's what you should know about the GFS. But the Euro trending a little weaker and a little bit further south with this system on the long-term predictions. The GFS predicting a stronger system, which it is, of course, influenced to do because it loves those 10-day out GFS-icanes. But it does look like when we see consensus like this, when we see the Euro forming a system kind of near where the GFS is forming a system, that's when we start paying more attention because we're seeing consensus. Then we'll check some of the lesser known models like the ICOM. We'll check the Google AI model. We'll see what other models are kind of agreeing on, and that's when we start to have confidence that we're actually going to see something develop, not when the GFS does what it does every single model run, which is predict those GFS-icanes 10 to 14 days out. So the short answer to that long explanation is the Euro in general is when we start paying attention this time of the year to when it starts matching the GFS, since the GFS all season long has been predicting hurricane after hurricane that didn't happen. All right. Hashtag Hey Juliana, have the AI models been accurate so far?
I know this is Rebecca's favorite segment, is to bring up the Google AI. And I think we also got this question like a week or two ago too. Mm-hmm. So far, so good from everything that I know. I'm inching this over there. That's going to bother me.
Thank you.
From Rebecca, what do you think? Because I honestly have not, we haven't really had a reason to kind of dip. I've stayed tried and true to our go-to model so far. I haven't really paid too much attention to the AI models. But have you been seeing any particular trend?
So the Google AI model did great with Hurricane Erin, but every model did great with Hurricane Erin. So it hasn't really been tested yet. I will say I've been watching the Euro AI model, which is the traditional European model with some AI added in there. And it's been behaving like the halfway point between the GFS and the AI. So it has been spinning up fake GFS-icanes in that 10 to 14 day range out. And so it hasn't been as reliable as what we would consider the traditional Euro. But one thing that, especially when we learned from our expert that we had from the National Hurricane Center that's helping integrate AI into these models, is AI is going to improve so much faster than traditional hurricane models are. So that'll be fun to watch over the next couple of seasons as AI continues to increase, because it will be able to self-fix and self-adjust and make big leaps and improvements much faster than traditional hurricane models do.
Exactly. These are still the couple seasons that we're training these AI models in a way.
Yes, absolutely. And then this is a great question because we did talk a little bit about this. Jeff Berardelli was talking about it a lot last week. Hashtag, hey, Rebecca, I heard Aaron's ACE alone made this an above average season. Is that true? And so it's put us above average for this time of the season. The ACE, that's accumulated cyclonic energy. And so it's a measure of all the energy that's used during hurricane season over the Atlantic. And it's above average for this time of the year, but not above average for the season end at this point. So that's kind of that's a nuance in the statistics there. So just because it was such a strong storm, it used so much energy, we're outpacing ourselves so far this season, but especially with the lull that's out there right now, we'll probably end up averaging out by the time things start to crank up again.
Oh, here it is. There we go. Oh, that's it. That's right.
Yeah, you had it. It was great. And so this is a great graphic showing that we're above season so far, above season average so far with 6 named storms, but below season average so far with number of hurricanes because we've only had one. But because that one was a major hurricane, we're above season. And of course, the energy, because it was major hurricane, is above season as well. All right. Hashtag, hey, Juliana. Hashtag, hey, Rebecca. Any chance there just won't be any more storms near land and we just go quietly about our lives for the rest of summer? LOL.
Hey, now, that'd be nice.
I'm in.
We're
all in. We love fish storms. And, it's not out of the question that especially with these early season fronts that we've seen, those fronts are acting like a block and keeping anything from turning our way. If we get a lull in those fronts that's perfectly timed up with tropical waves coming across, we could be, at danger of landfalls. But we've had 2 fronts much earlier in the season across the U.S. than we normally see, making it much further south than they normally do.
Yeah.
We didn't get to enjoy the fall-like weather, but the Southeast did last week, and they're loving it. We'd be loving it. It's not out of the question. We had that 2010 season to compare this to.
Exactly. And that's what I wish I had it here, but it's always good to remind ourselves that it's not impossible. Of course, the key as well is that it only takes one. So it could be a season of mostly fish storms. But one storm, it only takes one storm to make landfall to feel like it was a bad season. Yeah,
unfortunately. And then this is the day we all look forward to. Hey, Rebecca, when is the last day of hurricane season? And so November 1st is when we finally breathe our sigh of relief. And hurricane season doesn't mean that you can't see a system out of it, but it's hurricane season supposed to amass the most likely times of the year that you would see any hurricane tropical activity. We've had tropical systems every single month of the year. They're pretty rare, and they generally stay out in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of nowhere if it forms in November, December, or January, but it's possible, just not likely. And so generally I start to breathe a sigh of relief when we actually get a cold front that reaches Tampa, and that's usually late October, because once that parade of cold front starts, we're done, we're out, we're fine.
Yeah.
And so that's my unofficial end of hurricane season. All right. And we just had this question about ACE, and so that's good news. We'll move on to the next one. Hashtag, hey, Rebecca, we just moved down to Tampa Bay. When do we usually have to worry about storms here? And so on average, it's August and October. September is generally an East Coast problem. And so when we'll be really, really I haven't scheduled any days off in October because I don't want them to get canceled. And so meteorologists know your danger times. And so the times that we don't really book any vacations are August. Generally, September's dicey, but then October. August and October are the times that Tampa Bay is like, oof, okay. And hope those mythical Indian burial grounds are still strong.
Which is definitely, we felt that last season.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. We had Debbie in August, and then we had Helene and Milton in October.
Yeah.
So,
lots of things. Also something just to mention it, because I don't know if we'll have any questions about it, but I know we've had questions the last couple of weeks about La Nina watch, and quite literally from the Climate Prediction Center on La Nina watch. Right now, kind of sitting at an ENSO neutral, which, we'll talk about this from time to time here on Tracking the Tropics, that's, don't let that deceive you. That does not mean anything particularly positive or negative. ENSO neutral, we can actually see active and hyperactive tropics. So that's just a friendly reminder of where we're at. Yes, we're kind of on La Nina watch, and it does look like we could get closer to true La Nina towards really the end of the season and into winter.
Should be okay.
Yeah. So, at least our odds, though, are better with ENSO neutral. So we'll take that.
But we sure would love some El Nino.
Exactly. But let's bring it back.
Yeah, we love
El
El
Nino.
Well, this is your last call for questions. We're about to wrap things up here on Tracking the Tropics. If you want to ask one more question, use the hashtag #HeyRebecca or hashtag #HeyJuliana. If nothing forms in between now and next Tuesday, which seems unlikely, it seems like the system will form probably over the weekend. We'll hop back on here and give you guys an update. The next name on the list is Gabrielle. And then we move on to Umberto, Imelda, Jerry, Karen, Lorenzo, Melissa, Nestor, and hopefully we don't make it that far. It's unlikely, but we'd like to hope to not make it that far.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
All right. And so from the Stream Center, I'm meteorologist Rebecca Berry. Thank you so much to meteorologist Juliana Mejia. She is the one that prepares all of these graphics and gets everything ready so that you are in the know on Tracking the Tropics. Once again, if nothing else forms in between now and next Tuesday, we'll see you at 12:30, but most likely going to check in with you sometime this weekend and let you know what is going on with Gabrielle.